Athletics top prospects here on the call up. We got another team top prospect list in the books. We're winding it down before it's update time. Only a handful left. I'd say almost less than a handful. But of course, I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. And this is a fun system. I think every system is mostly fun for us on this show. There's a couple that may be exceptions to that rule. But the reason why I love this system, Jack, and we've talked about this, is I think, and I have no one has told me this. I haven't talked to any scouts or anything to give me this thought, but just from what I've seen, it seems like the A's try to find value on extreme ends of the spectrum, whether it's a ton of hit and not very much power at all, or tools like crazy and serious hit tool concerns, both of which end up getting docked heavily by draft models and can be, buy low options in the draft that kind of slide under the radar. And it just feels like that's what they do here, because there's a wide range of types of players that we're going to talk about in this episode.
Okay, so now let me ask you, do you think that's a bad approach? Because I don't.
No, I don't at all. And I genuinely think if I like, that would be the first thing I would ever ask somebody that works within the front office of the A's is, no, A's is A's acceptable? Can you still go A's, or is it only athletics now?
Dude, it's so weird. Like, we're not going to call them the Sacramento A's, and the abbreviation is now ATH. Like, they're just the athletics.
John Fisher can shove it. I'm going to call them the A's. That's what we're going to do here.
They're going to be the A's. I do think that they are the A's, and I think that they're the athletics. I don't think A's is unique to Oakland, so I think they're still going to go by the A's and the athletics. Okay. But the fact that we can't identify the A's with a city, it just looks so weird. The title of the article, and it's a great article, go read it, but the title of the article looks so weird because it should always be Atlanta Braves. And by the way, you mentioned less than a handful. The Atlanta Braves, the Kansas City Royals, the Houston Astros, and the LA Angels. Those are the only 4 organizations that are left that we have not done so far. So those will be coming up, I'm sure. Maybe pre-Christmas. We'll see what happens here. Maybe right after New Year's too. But yeah, it's just so stupid to me. Pick a city, pick an identity. If you're going to do the Sacramento thing, you should be the Sacramento A's for the next couple seasons.
A lot of things were put into motion before actually figuring out logistics. And that wasn't just the legal side of things. That wasn't just the actual political side of things, I think, as well. It was actually the name side of things too. So I think that shows you just how haphazard this whole thing has been done. But for fans, we want to give them something to be excited about and look forward to. And I think there's plenty of that in this system. But to circle back to the initial sentiment, I actually do like the approach a lot, especially when both ends of the spectrum kind of hedge each other, right? Where you have an opportunity to take a Jacob Wilson, who was clearly undervalued by us included, because it was hit. And then what else are you going to get? Well, he can play shortstop, and you hope that the power is ample enough to be an everyday player. And it looks like it could be. You go on the opposite side, though, and like a Henry Bolte, who we'll talk about, tools galore. A player with that kind of speed and power combination is rarely available outside of the first round. And they took a shot and grabbed him. Well, there's other examples of that too. We'll talk about Denzel Clarke and others, but it seems really to be fascinating, where I think teams with their draft models and maybe their specific biases, that they just, hey, we really don't like guys that have that much of a hit tool concern, or we really don't like guys that don't have much else to offer beyond the hit tool. Clearly, the A's are kind of cleaning that up there, and we'll see if it translates. But of course, you still get the more well-rounded hitter in a Nick Kurtz when you can, and that's exactly what they did. And he's at the top of that system too. But this is a solid farm at the top. I think it lacks some depth, but they were able to add some finally at this deadline without trading everybody, right? I actually support the idea of not trading a Brent Rooker, and I support the idea of keeping some of these players with multiple years of control together here. Mason Miller may have been moved. I would have supported either way there, considering the injury history and the fact that he's a reliever, but I'm happy to see him still with a small market team here. So to turn a Paul Blackburn and to turn a Lucas Erceg into, some decent prospects here, I actually think this gave them a lot more depth into this system as well.
Yeah, and they were in a bad situation, man. Like they had next to no redeeming qualities in 2023. It's really hard to bolster your farm system when you don't have tradable assets on the big league team. And unfortunately, that's what we were looking at with the Oakland A's. I think it's a very similar sentiment to what happened this past season with the Chicago White Sox. If you're not going to move Crochet and Robert, what are you going to get? The answer
Yeah,
was nothing for the White
yeah,
Sox. It's really hard to improve a system when you have no tradable assets. All of a sudden they found tradable assets in an Urseg, in a Blackburn, and they had two top 10 prospects in the organization. And I'm with you 100%. I like that they kept the core together. Rooker would get them a nice return,
oh
but
yeah,
they view Rooker as a piece for the next 4 years when they think they can enter a competitive window again. They view Mason Miller as a piece for the next couple of years when they feel like they can enter a competitive window again. You couple that with a Lawrence Butler breakout, with a Jacob Wilson breakout, and with guys like Soderstrom and Shea Langoliers and Geloff. I know he had a bad year, but he could bounce back. Like JJ Bleday had a 4-win season. They have a lot of good going on right now. And I said this on the Just Baseball show last week when we did the AL West season in review. Like it or not, A's fans, I think David Forst is a very good general manager. I think this guy has an identity, and I think that he is exactly who Oakland needs. They need to find sustainable success at the bottom of Major League Baseball's payroll, like rankings. And they're going to do that. They did that with Billy Beane. I think they can do that with David Forst.
I'm starting to see it for sure. And I think especially at the big league level of helping get these guys, to that next phase where like a JJ Bleday didn't have a lot of confidence in being able to do that. A Lawrence Butler didn't have a lot of confidence in him being able to do what he was able to do down the stretch and how good he looked. That was one of my favorite dives I did during the season. So a lot to be said, I think, about the staff there too, and seeming, to get these players to progress and tap into their potential. So that is always a great wrinkle to have as well. And I do really like, from a personnel perspective, like the players farm system wise at the upper levels now and on the big league field, I can definitely see the direction here. I totally agree. So as always, the write-ups are linked in the episode description. And if you're on YouTube with us, we are now sharing. So we will start with the most fun name to say that we were practicing before. And it's already lost. Like I'm already lost on the pronunciation. So it's all you, Jack. Take us through the names to watch.
Okay, so we're going to start with this right-hander, this Taiwanese right-hander, Chen Zhang Ao Zhuang. I think I got that right. But Chen Zhang Ao Zhuang got up to AA. He was really good in low A and then high A as well. This guy has a sub-3 ERA in 128 minor league innings at this point. He signed older. His pro debut came when he was 21 years old. Then he missed the entirety of 23 with shoulder issues. And then 2024, this guy was awesome. ERA in the low twos between the single A levels and a brief sample in double A too. It's 92, like 92, 93. We'll occasionally get it up to 95, but that is super sporadic. But it's carry at the top and a changeup that dives a ton arm side working off of that. He's got that classic slower 12-6 and a split to go with that. But that fastball changeup combo could be a big league tandem.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's going to try to lean into. It's a very over the top delivery. Definitely a guy that had some consideration in the top 15, but with the 2023 being wiped out, the lack of velocity, yes, he does get some carry, but nothing really nothing jumps off the page. Like it seems like more of a depth arm here, but you can use those guys, and I think he's a solid arm to have.
No doubt. Will Simpson was the organization leader in WRC plus among qualified hitters this year. He's a first baseman, but he had a 144 WRC plus in 550 plate appearances. This was a steal, man. 15th round pick in 2023 out of Washington. He was a senior. He spent 4 years at UW. And this guy, his career 872 OPS, 44 doubles, 24 homers, driven in 113 in 163 MILB games. Like, that's a legit producer at first base. Problem is he's a first baseman, but they may have a big leaguer here.
Yeah, definitely. Another guy that you look at the batted ball markers and swing decisions in college and kind of pointed towards somebody that would probably struggle to transition into professional ball. And he hasn't. So this does look like a guy that could be a piece. And still just turned 23. It was really his age 22 season. Pretty impressive numbers overall, and definitely a strong name to watch.
Nate Nankel is somebody that is not on very many top 30 prospects anywhere. When you look at, industry wide. I think he's like 30 on Baseball America. He's not on Pipeline. Fangraphs has him in the mid 30s, I want to say. But this guy, like, at the end of the day, he was 21 years old and he put together a 303, 404, 458 slash, walked 11% of the time, K'd less than 20% of the time. He's a corner outfielder that only hit 11 homers. So I feel like that's the worry, where he's not going to be a burner and he's not going to hit the ball out of the ballpark all the time. But at the end of the day, he hit 300 in his first full pro season at a 138 WRC plus, and he walked a lot.
Yeah, it's just, again, another guy producing. It seems to be those undervalued, and yeah, I think the bats that maybe didn't have a ton beyond the offensive side of things, that you really have to bet on them just squeezing out every drop of what is already kind of fringy peripherals. Some of these guys have been doing quite well for them, and I think the big thing with Nankel is low chase rate. 17% chase rate on the season. That's always going to help you have some success. Crushes fastballs. That always helps too. You don't chase and you crush fastballs, you'll give yourself a pretty nice base. It's just going to be, can you hit the secondary stuff, and how much value can he provide beyond the bat?
Yeah. Another first baseman, this guy in AA, Brennan Malone. It's interesting, man. Malone, career 285, 381, 455 slash. He started his college career at South Carolina, went to Oregon. He tapped into the power a little bit more than I think many were expecting. 17 homers in 2023, 15 in 127 games in Midland this past year. He's a smaller first baseman. I think he's listed at like 6'180" or 6'185". But he's producing.
Yeah, I don't understand this profile at all. Like, I think he might end up playing second, and they just can hope he can get by there, because there's not. I mean, he outslugged the EVs last year, no doubt about it. But there's not a lot of impact here. So I don't know what the profile necessarily is, but like you said, he's producing. So he's going to be a name to watch. I think it's going to be important to try to get him away from first base, considering his ceiling power-wise is probably something similar to what you saw last year.
Like 15. Yeah. Cole Miller, another guy. I really don't have much on him, but what I was reading, the idea is tantalizing. He's a big kid, 6'6", 225, fastball up to the mid-90s, feel for a slider and a changeup in high school. It's interesting. Like, dad was an NFL wide receiver, so there's clearly some athleticism there. It's intriguing enough to be a name to watch, even though he has yet to throw a professional inning.
Yeah, I don't have anything really on him stuff-wise either. I couldn't find much high school, like anything, but you have the storyline there. You have the body and the bloodlines, and I mean, that's going to be a player that I'm very interested to see what the pro debut eventually looks like.
Next name to watch is Will Klein, right-hander that was part of that Urseg deal as well. And Klein was in Omaha. He got his major league debut under his belt with Kansas City, and then he was traded at the 2024 deadline. If you see, I'm getting closer to the camera here for the YouTube crowd. There's some gray on the sides. Most of that is because of Ricky Karcher, formerly with the Reds. But some of that is because of Will Klein, because this stuff is so loud. It's high 90s, can get to 100. It's a nasty breaking ball. The question is it going to be anywhere close to the strike zone? When it's anywhere close, he's really good and a borderline big league setup guy. When it's not, he's not a major league reliever.
Yep. That's really what it boils down to, because it's upper 90s, like you said, in a bang. I mean, that slider is a banger. Like, it is a gross pitch, big in zone whiff numbers and everything. But hitters were really just going up there prepared to take a walk, and 16.5% of them did. So if you hunt fastball and really prepared to spin on anything else, it's going to be hard. But if he can rein it in at all, this is another solid bullpen arm, for the A's.
Gunnar Hoglund, how do you feel about him? Because I know he's a guy that's in a lot of top 15s.
Yeah, he was probably 16. Like, if there was one guy, I ultimately went for the reliever, and we'll get there, that already showed some success at the big league level and dominated at the upper minors. And then I went with a Kade Morris, which I'll make the specific pitch as to why Kade got the nod over a Gunnar Hoglund. The challenge is it's low 90s, right? It's mostly going to be 91, 92. There was a lot of starts where it was 90, 91. He's got a good feel for the secondaries. Like, the slider and the changeup are pretty good. I just don't know if he's going to be able to make that work at 91, 92. Both secondaries are at about 82, 83. And they're pretty good pitches, but there's no fallback of the bullpen either. It's kind of stick in the back of a rotation, or, you're a shuttle arm, essentially.
he made it work this year off of Tommy John surgery. It was nice. Like the K to BB ratio was back. He 8 innings. It was 131 innings this year between Midland and Vegas. And it was a 3.5 ERA in 2-hitter friendly environments. He's got the pedigree as well, like 2-time first round pick, essentially. He was 36th overall by the Pirates in 18, then 19th by the Jays in 21. But he's on the 40-man now. He's going to make starts, and Oakland needs starts bad. Like that is the one clear-cut deficiency. They really don't have starting pitching.
No doubt. A lot of injuries too, though. I think besides the TJ, like some other things that have kind of bothered him in the past too, and seeing that velo, just kind of tick to where it was at and slip at the end of the year. But this could be a 5-starter that eats innings for you, and that would be more than enough and probably justifiably a top 15 guy. So he was right there.
This guy embodies names to watch. Rodney Green, outfielder in low A. You think about Henry Bolte and Denzel Clarke and Colby Thomas, go a step below, and Rodney Green is right there. This guy K'd 28% of the time at Cal Berkeley in his draft year, but he hit the ball to the ballpark. He swipes bags. He's a really good outfielder. Like I called it a project. Like he's an exciting project at the lower levels in 2025, and you see what happens, and you hope that he can be Henry Bolte this year.
Exactly. What I like is he's patient. And I mean, that's something that really helps when you are tooled up and you're going to whiff a bunch, and he's going to whiff a bunch, right? But he ran a chase rate below 20% at Berkeley. And then he, in his pro debut, ran a chase rate even lower than that. So that will help. If he can be a 3 true outcome player that can, pick it up the middle in center field, like that'll be more than fine. So this is definitely a player that I'm excited to see if he can just hit enough simply as he faces more challenging pitching.
We had a conversation this morning about Brian Buelvas versus Miles Naylor, and we opted for Buelvas. And you could say, wow, I mean, Naylor's got the brothers, and Naylor was a first-round pick or CB competitive balance pick, whatever.
Over slot guy. Yeah, got a lot of money.
Yeah, it's like, and he's only 19 years old. Well, there's a lot of clear-cut deficiencies in Naylor's game right now, and Buelvas, there's no loud tool, but he's 22 years old, and there isn't really a clear-cut deficiency in his game right now. He's fine at everything.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that has slowly but surely made his way through the minor league ranks. He's probably not going to debut with Oakland, but I'd be kind of surprised if he never made a big league debut.
No, I think he's a solid bench piece here. Corner outfield guy. I mean, it's like you said, it's solid across the board, but he hits lefties really well. So I could see maybe a short platoon side of things. Last year hit 304 with an 846 OPS against lefties, but patient hitter, makes enough contact, hits the ball hard enough. Yeah, it's just kind of everything is solid. So I do think this could be a solid bench player potentially, and he's still just 22 years old.
Yeah. Last but not least, you said Hoagland was probably number 16. Cooper Bowman is probably number 17. Cooper Bowman, second baseman, was a Louisville Cardinal. He was originally with the Yankees. He was part of the Frankie Montas deal. He can fly, and he has defensive versatility. And it's weird because he wasn't bouncing around at Midland and then bouncing around in Vegas. He was a second baseman in AA. And when he got the AAA call-up, he was a center fielder in AAA. It was kind of weird, but I feel like you do have that classic second base outfield type that is going to be a serviceable bench bat. Think Birdie. Like there are so many Birdie types, and think John Birdie here.
Yeah, I think the big thing for him was he got up to AAA and struggled there surprisingly, and I think that was because of the aggressive approach. He had been more patient at the lower levels, and then just started to expand more and more there, and maybe trying to do too much. But I mean, the defensive versatility, the speed, all that good stuff definitely seems like a high probability bench piece as well. And for those that are maybe wondering, okay, why did Miles Naylor not make the cut just very quickly? Just so people can just get a gauge here. In terms of the batted ball markers, the contact rate was as low as anybody in the organization that was playing regularly, 51% contact rate. And then off of that, you didn't really have enough flashes power wise to justify so much swing and miss. Yeah. And I mean, the guy struck out 35% of the time in low A. So I don't know about the glove either. There's a lot of questions here. Obviously bloodlines, obviously he's a good athlete, but it seems very, very far off at this point.
Two other guys that were left on the cutting room floor. Brett Harris, I know, made his debut this year. It was really not good in the big leagues. And frankly, I take all the guys we just ran through to have a bit more production at the major league level than a Brett Harris. And a Ryan Cusick, former first-round pick of the Braves that came over in the Olsen deal, he was just added to the 40-man roster. There's really like, I see a lot of Jared Schuster and Ryan Cusick in terms of like, okay, you got the first-round pedigree, you've got that, classic zone pounder identity, whatever it is. I like a lot of these arms a lot more than Ryan Cusick at this point, to be honest.
Yeah, Cusick's gonna, and what's weird is he's kind of shifted more towards the like, it's stuff, and you hope it's around the zone enough at this point now, because he just, I don't know, it's 6'6", big guy. It just seems to struggle to fill it up now at this point, and hitters just were not swinging this past year, and that, I think they didn't want to lose out on a guy that was also part of an important package and all that good stuff, and you have probably a very easy spot to add him. He finished the year pretty strong in Double-A, but he's 25 years old at this point. It just, I think there's some other reliever arms throughout the system that I probably have a little bit more interest in. But if it all clicks for him way later, all of a sudden this could be a solid, big league relief piece eventually. Gunnar Hoglund was also added to the 40-man roster as well. If I don't know if we mentioned that.
Yeah.
We're going to get to number 15. Reliever Grant Holman in a second, but before that, a quick break. All right, Grant Holman. I know we talked about him at points this year because of how ridiculous his numbers were between Double-A and Triple-A. He didn't allow a run in Double-A for a while. I think, what was it, 20-something innings there? Then he got to Triple-A, and I mean, in the PCL, he was just as effective. Before he got called up, it was a 0.55 ERA in 48 2/3 innings. Then gets up to the big leagues and held his own there in a relief role. I think an ERA right around 4, but some solid swing and miss numbers. Everything looked pretty decent. What really stood out to me this year is he found that split change and really found a lot of confidence in it. There was points where the slider was his preferred secondary and that pitch was flashing closer to average. That pitch backed up a little bit on him this year and was looking fringier, but then you had this changeup make this leap into a clear plus pitch. Fastball is comfortably above average. He gets a lead extension. It's 7.1 or 2 feet of extension there that really helps it get on hitters quickly. Doesn't have the best shape in the world, but again, when you're mid 90s and you're releasing it from more than 7 feet, extension, it's going to play above average. And with that fastball and split combination and a slider that flashes average, I think this is just a high probability big league reliever and a guy that could be a solid 7th inning piece.
It's funny, man. Like 19 1/3 innings in Midland, no runs came in against him. Like not even an unearned run came in against him. It was 19 1/3, 12 hits, no runs, K'd 24 and walked 9. Opponents hit a .190 against him, and he had a 1.1 whip. He got to AAA, and he had an ERA there, which like actually gave him in the minor leagues a 0.55 ERA and 48 2/3, but 29 1/3, 5 runs, 3 of which earned. He was arguably better, even though he allowed runs in AAA. Opponents hit 190 against him in 114 plate appearances in Midland. Opponents hit 131 against him in AAA. So he leveled up by 60 points in the batting average against department. And I mean, he bettered the whip by 20 points. Like it went from 1.1 to 0.9.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you want to see, especially in that environment. And I think the real reason why that happened is as the season progressed, he threw that split more and more and more because he realized, okay, this has become my best offering. Opponents hit 136 against that pitch. That's including his big league debut. And I think that's a pitch that we're just going to see him continue to lean further into, and I think results in more success. He still only threw it 22% at the time. So that's something that I think can really unlock more for him as a pitch that I'd like to see close to 30%, around 30% usage. And, that slider still fine offering to mix in there. But I mean, that split can work against lefties and righties. He's going to be on that opening day roster, I think, and should be, another solid piece in that bullpen to help kind of reload after you subtracted some pieces at the deadline.
So real quick, last thing on Holman, a name that jumped to my mind when you mentioned the use of that split change, a guy that did find the splitter in the upper levels of the minor leagues. I think it happened in high A or Double-A. David Bednar rode a splitter to the big leagues. I think a lot of people talk about his 4-seam fastball and like, hey, it plays so well at the top of the zone. When he first got up in 2019, he was 35% split usage, like 42% 4-seamer. So this is a guy that rode it to the show. And then figured out how to improve and become an all-star up there. I'm not saying that Holman is going to be an all-star, but like he found his ticket to the big leagues. He cashed in the ticket. And now all of a sudden he can find improvements elsewhere to couple with that changeup at the big league level.
I think it's a great point. And he also was a two-way guy at Cal out of the gate. So like this is
and like a good one, like an 850 OPS.
Yeah. So he shifted the focus on the mound, a little bit later. And I think there's still could be some development to be had there. And that tunnel at 6'6" with the fastball and the split with that extension in the mid 90s, I think the more he uses that changeup, like that will also allow the fastball to keep playing up as well. And opponents hit 190 against that this season also. So just a great year for Holman, and I think surely an important piece in the bullpen going into next season. Yeah. Number 14 is a draft pick from this past year and had a nice pro debut. Josh Kuroda-Grauer. He was the 3rd round pick with 75th overall in this past draft out of Rutgers. Made it up to AAA. I think they just wanted to get him some more games. I doubt he starts the season in AAA next year, but we'll see. It's hit over everything with him, and that was very clear. In terms of like bat to ball, it's if I just based it off of contact rates, it'd be a 60 hit tool. The problem is it's bat to ball and a lot of ground balls and not a very high EV. So it's going to be a lower batting average on balls in play. And he's probably just not going to be a guy that is going to hit, 300 at the highest level, even though he's going to post contact rates that are, up there with the guys that do. That said, the bat to ball is going to give him a higher floor. The fact that he's an above average runner helps. The fact that he's solid at shortstop. I don't think he's a guy that you want playing a full season at shortstop, but the fact that he can plug in there, and if he's playing 50, 60 games a year there, I think you feel just fine. And he can move all over the infield. That also helps. He screams solid bench option. And I think he's a guy that could probably climb relatively quickly. But he's going to have to hit the ball in the air and a little bit harder if he wants to potentially project as, I think, an everyday guy.
Yeah, your family, your religion, and Rutgers baseball. Shout out to Rutgers Scarlet Knights. The 4-game sample in Vegas is kind of weird at the end of the year. But, I mean, dude, like, he just hit and hit and hit. Damn. Do you feel like I see the 10-point jump from 45 hit to 55 future? Like, do you feel like it could be a 50-60 type thing? Because I know 2024 felt a little flash in the pan-y compared to his previous years in college and like the amateur ranks. I feel like you're almost saying like, I do feel like that was kind of a flash in the pan, and we'll see if it regresses a little bit.
Yeah. My concern is like you take metal out of his hands and you put better defenders out there. Are all of those balls in play going to translate into hits the same way? Because at the end of the day, the hit tool is supposed to translate into batting average projection there. And so he might post 90+% in zone contact rate, but if it's a ground ball to third base, that's routine. Like that's the problem. So my concern was that as he got to the professional side, like you could really see how the ball is not going to jump off the bat the same way. It wouldn't shock me though if he starts hitting the ball at better angles and things like that. Like that would help. But when your contact also comes with extremely high ground ball rates at a low EV, you're probably not going to have a BABIP over 440 like he had in college. So that's my one concern, but it wouldn't shock me.
Got you.
Heading into 13 here, another player acquired at the deadline from the Mets, Kade Morris, right-handed pitcher. He's a 3rd round pick by the Mets in 2023 and was acquired in that Paul Blackburn swap. I like this get for them. Obviously, you were not going to get some crazy prospect for Paul Blackburn, but you get a guy that, it's the nature of these trades, so could be Paul Blackburn. But yeah, the thing that I like about Morris is he makes up for, I think, the lack of standout stuff with a kitchen sink approach and a good feel to pitch. Yeah. And the thing that separated him this year from, I think, the first look that we got from him professionally, 2 distinct fastballs now. 4-seamer that he throws more to lefties at the top, and then a sinker that's probably his most consistent pitch that he will wear out righties with and then pairs well with his slider. Ground ball rate on that sinker, really high. I think he could be a pitch to contact back end of the rotation type of guy. Question's going to be, how does that curveball or changeup come along? Because he's a very splits dependent pitcher where like, and I wouldn't say splits dependent, but he has just very clear splits where righties don't play well against him, don't hit well against him. Lefties definitely a lot more comfortable because realistically, his two best pitches are his sinker and his slider. And those two pitches are predominantly used for righties. So he's got to find a way to get these lefties out. And I think that's going to be with the changeup coming along a little bit more. But you fill up the zone with essentially 5-6 pitches and get enough ground balls. I think he could be a back end of the rotation arm.
237 ABs from lefties this year against Kade Morris and 874 OPS. 288 ABs from righties this year, a 626 OPS. 250 point difference in OPS. And batting average, lefties hit 291, righties hit 219. That changeup is very important. And like, it's not fun seeing the 40 grade on that, but you know, it's so be it. The 50-55 command is awesome to see. And I'm with you. Like, I close my eyes and I see a guy where it's like, okay, the year's not going well. Kade Morris gave you 125 innings as a sinker slider guy, and he gave you an ERA in the mid fours.
Yep.
Like that. Yep. And there's value there. There's value in that happening, especially for a team like Oakland.
No doubt. Yeah. And if that changeup can come along, maybe it can be a 50, or that cutter, that could be a pitch that spells lefties as well. The sinker slider combination, though, this is a guy that, different from Hoagland here, could move into a relief role and be quite effective there because he's 94. He averaged 94 miles per hour, and you put him in shorter spurts. If that ticks up to 95, 96, I think you feel a lot better about his ability to get righties out in a relief role, and especially when you see those splits. So this is still a guy, though, like I think has some room to add some strength, could even see a velo tick up. So with more still to potentially project here too at just 22 years old, that's what kind of gave him the edge over Hoagland, while also I think having a floor that's not all that much lower than Gunnar Hoagland at this point, because I think he has a great chance of being able to be that fringe 5 starter, and at the very least be that long reliever swingman type.
Yeah.
Number 12, and I'd venture to say we're the low guys on here, so this one might just skew more negative just to justify and explain the ranking. But number 12 is Tommy White, who got first round money this past year, $3 million, 40th overall. Of course, from LSU and NC State is where he earned the moniker Tommy Tanks.
Yep.
That was also his best year. He did have 2 more solid seasons in college, but this is a player where I've never seen it. And I think if you listen to the call up since we were doing draft stuff, a year and change ago, I just never really saw it. And it's just not me just leaning into it and continuing to say, I don't see it, so I'm never going to come around. I sent you some video. I watched every at bat I could. I tried to talk myself into it. Like, clearly a team was willing to give him first round money. Like, there's got to be something I'm missing. We know about the power. He hits the ball hard. And he hits home runs. Like, it's definitely something that he can do. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that nearly as much professionally. I think it's one of the more bizarre swings I've seen. The 2-strike approach, I don't think actually does him any good, and I'll get into that. And there's, he's come along at third. He went from definitely a guy that has to move to first potentially to a guy that could be passable at third.
Yeah. But
you're not getting any value beyond the bat here. And with fringy hit and fringy plate discipline, he's got to hit 30 plus bombs to be a productive player.
Yeah. And, it's a 25 game sample. You got 119 plate appearances in low A, but I'd expect a guy named Tommy Tanks to hit more than 2 homers in 119 plate appearances in low A when you just came from the SEC and you hit 48 homers over the last 2 years at LSU. Like, I was expecting a little bit more in his pro debut. I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about golf, but I just saw a video the other day of a guy setting the club head speed record. You know what I'm talking about? Like a screen golf thing. It's this guy just ripping a driver as fast as he possibly can. And I know that the mechanics were off. Like, I know that, but he's not shooting for precision. He's not shooting for 350 down the fairway. He's shooting for a club head speed record. And that is the way that I kind of look at Tommy Tanks, where it's like, all right, I like what you're doing in terms of hitting homers at the college level, but this is a precision game. And I don't know if you're precise enough right now to be that guy that was given first round money. Is that fair?
I think that's a great comp. And like, he's got the bat speed, right? Like he really can swing that thing hard and it'll explode through the zone. But it's some crazy moves too that I think can be very difficult to time up at the professional level. And also, like, the swing can get so out of control that he's flying through the zone and striking the baseball hard, but I don't think he's always hitting it at the most ideal angle. You can get away with that more with metal when you're just generating so much raw force, but with wood, it's a lot more of those 350-foot flyouts and stuff like that. So, I mean, starting open the way that he does, and like, it's so wide. It is ridiculously wide. I just don't see how you can get into the backside and actually control your weight. He's so wide that everything just kind of funnels back up to the middle. It's similar to the Drew Jones conversation. But he also has this toe tap that he uses, and then he tips the barrel almost to like 80 degrees. So there's just so much movement that has to be, timed up perfectly. And then again, the two-strike approach, I think, is even more weird, where his front foot is pointing towards the pitcher. He's still extremely wide, if not more wide somehow, almost doing a split. And there's only one place to go from that position, and that's forward. So it might help you put the ball in play a little bit more, but at what cost?
I'd rather the K rate was very low.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
You ground it out instead of striking. I'd rather you take a hack and run into one every fifth time you strike out, or you strike out 5 times, you run into one. Rather that than just a bunch of ground outs and or just weak fly balls. And there were some swings that by the time he made contact, his feet were back together. So it's like, you being that wide is only putting you in a position to where your body's going to want to kind of narrow back up again when you're swinging it. And he was literally standing up. So I don't really get it. Hopefully, if they're either, he could be an outlier guy that just makes it work off of sheer bat speed and clearly some hand-eye coordination. But I just don't see that happening against professional stuff. Yeah, I just think it's going to be too hard. But the reason why, you still got to monitor him and he's still a solid prospect is that, maybe he makes an adjustment and then it works from there. And he, can start to really hit there. But I mean, like, with 2 strikes, he's a 198 hitter, I think, between his pro and college debut. And it was just more contact on the ground at that point. So yeah, I think there's going to need to be some major swing adjustments.
Yeah, it does feel good in theory, but poor in execution when it comes to like the 2-strike approach and all that. It's like, oh, I love that he has one, but I mean, it's too drastic right now. And it just feels like there's a guy that's stuck between a couple of identities right now. Like, who do you want to be? Do you want to be that guy that doesn't punch with 2 strikes, or do you want to be the guy that hits 30 homers? And I feel like choosing the 30 homer thing is probably the right avenue, but I have no idea where his thought process is in terms of choosing which avenue and which identity he wants to be.
No doubt. And I think it worked for him more in 23. I'm looking at it now too. Like, he was a great hitter with 2 strikes in 23.
He drove in 105 runs in a college season. Now a lot of that was, a lot of guys were in scoring position for him. I'm thinking like a Cade Beloso and a Trade Morgan, like they were all in scoring position for him when he was up. But at the end of the day, like, he drove in 105. Wow.
Like, his chase rate with 2 strikes in that 2023 season was over 60%.
Yeah. So he was just like, oh, I can get to anything now.
I can get to anything. So, testament to the hand-eye, and maybe that can push the hit tool closer to a 50. But I just don't see how that's going to happen with all those moving parts. But I hope I'm wrong, because he's a fun player, and it's really satisfying to see him run into him.
Yeah.
Number 11, Steven Echavarria, another big money outside of the first round money guy. He got $3 million. Was it did Tommy White get $4 million? No, he got $3 million. I want to say they both got 3.
I think they did. I'll check right now.
But Echavarria, 72nd overall pick in 2023. Draft models loved him because he was 17 years old on draft day and threw fuzz and has some projection. It was not a good professional debut. That said, a lot of guys his age were usually throwing on the complex, especially out of high school and making that debut. And I think if he was throwing at the complex, he would have overwhelmed hitters because he has a pair of fastballs in the mid 90s that, have some interesting characteristics and a disgusting slider that he can spin the heck out of in the high 2000 RPM range. Flashed an okay changeup. This is a project here. And I'm not going to make too much of a 6.55 ERA when you're an 18-year-old in low A in environments that are relatively easy to hit in. And I think some of that ERA being so inflated were a couple just massive blow-up starts where you gave up 8, 9, 10 earned runs. Yeah. But, I mean, this guy has a pair of interesting heaters and a disgusting slider. It could be legit closer stuff if it doesn't work as a starter. But there's also a lot of time for it to work as a starter. So this is just pure wait and see, tough to really difficult to put a future value on a player like this. So I just really lean into what I would value him at. And I would value him at a guy that at this point projects as, I would say I would value him at basically where Tommy White is and where we got Daniel Susac, which is fringe big leaguer, but right now he's not a fringe big leaguer because he's so far off, but could also be much better than that. Could also be worse than that.
Right. Both of them got 3. The difference was Tommy White's slot value was 2.33 and Echavarria's slot was 1.01. So he got about $2 million over slot, and they saved with Jacob Wilson that year. They also saved with another Rutgers guy, Ryan Lasko. Shout out the A's leaning into the Rutgers baseball scene. So Lasko went, second round, 41st overall in 2023, and then they grab Josh Kuroda-Grauer in 2024. But I don't have much there. I thought it was interesting that they gave him a ton of money, in the third round, 72nd overall, but it's a project that I frankly haven't checked in on enough.
Yeah. And I think even at the time we were a little surprised by it. But there were definitely a bunch of, a handful of good outings this year. So it's just one of those situations where you just got to hope the pitchability comes along and some other things as well. And it might be age 21 season where it comes together. This is a guy that probably should have went to college, but when you get $3 million, forget school. So I don't blame him. It's just, I think the A's kind of knew that this was going to be a process.
Yeah.
Number 10, as we alluded to, Daniel Susac. And this is where I think we are actually higher than others. And I'll make the case. I'm not high on him to the degree that I think he's going to be an everyday big league catcher. It's possible. I think he could be a second division regular, to be honest, though. So I think there's a decent shot. But I just like the way that he could potentially fill a big league role. And that's what I'm looking at here. You get to see a little of him in the fall league as well. Obviously comes with the first round pedigree in 2022, but he's come along enough defensively as a catcher where that's a guy that I absolutely could see, catching at the big league level and being average there. But the other side of it is he is struggling to find that offensive identity where I think in 2023, we saw him lean into the power a little bit more. And then in 2024, we saw him, I think, try to be more of a bat to ball guy, hedge the swing and miss. And he did that. But with that came, I think, a dip in the power. The biggest challenge for him, I think, at this point is the swing decisions. And I think if he could cut that chase down from 35%, which is way too high, he'd be in quite a good spot. But with the defense coming along the way that it has, rocket for an arm, he limits the running game pretty well. And the fact that he destroys lefties and has historically destroyed lefties, I could see him being that, part-time catcher, platoon bat that you just deploy to destroy left-handed pitching. And I think that's a role that actually could be served in the big leagues.
It's kind of a bar. Deploy to destroy. That's sick. I'm with you. I think if I were to ask, 50 people on the street, and it's 50 people on the street aren't going to know Daniel Susac. But if I asked 50 baseball fans, 50 prospect fans, what Daniel Susac's WRC plus was this year, probably say, I don't know, 80 something. It was 103. He was better than the league average hitter in the Texas League this year as a 23-year-old. You mentioned the first round pedigree. He was a 19th overall pick. His brother was in the big leagues at one point. there's enough to be comfortable with Daniel Susac. Now, the difference between Susac and Soderstrom and Langoliers is massive.
Yes.
And I don't know what Soderstrom's deal is going to be. Is he going to catch a game in the show? I have no idea. If they do, then Susac becomes expendable. And I think that that's a piece that a lot of teams would like, taking a chance on. I don't think Susac's debut comes with the A's, but I do think that it comes at some point, but relatively soon. I think he's going to go to Vegas this year, and we may see him get moved at the deadline, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder if Soderstrom is no longer like catching really much at all, and it seems like that is the plan. So he's just first base. Then I don't know who the backup catcher is for the A's at this point. I have no idea.
Let me pull this up.
But you have Susac who can. But the thing that's crazy about Soderstrom, he's reverse splits this past year. So it kind of hurts my point. But I was going to say, like, if he wasn't reverse splits, that could be a guy that, let's say he's struggling against big league lefties. Okay, he could take some of those left-handed at-bats, left-handed pitching at-bats, spot start at first base, and then spot start, when you want to give Langoliers a day off, or, when you want to go heavy against a lineup where you're facing a left-handed pitcher. He could, spot start in the DH spot as well. So, like, again, I just think there's some different roles to fill where he can play 3-4 days a week. But I still think there's enough potential here. Like, he's 23 years old and has come along defensively. If he can get closer to tapping into that 20 to 25 home run power while, maintaining the bat to ball that, he's been a little bit more hit over power in his career. I do think this is a guy that ultimately can, be a passable everyday catcher for, a second division team.
The question of the back half of 25 and 2026 is going to be Daniel Susac or Kyle McCann. And I don't think that's cut and dry. Oh, give me the prospect. Like, I think McCann's actually decent. And I think that's a solid big league backup option behind the dish. So yeah, I would lean McCann at this point, but baseball's weird, man. Like, shit can change in 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So could be bait or, it's just another insurance policy. Number 9, Colby Thomas, outfielder who played most of the year in AAA. Big year for him. And a guy that I know some people are excited about. Yeah. I struggle to figure out exactly what the role is going to be outside of like a platoon bat. Like, I just don't know if there's everyday potential there, but he's an above average runner with above average power. That's the calling card. He sold out for lift this year. Like, I sold out, and his swing even implies it. It is a lofty swing. It's like that uppercut, really like deep in the zone, like gets way behind him, and it allows him to elevate. And he was able to elevate, and he hit 31 home runs and, some hitter friendly environments, but they were home runs. And like, he hit it hard enough. The EVs were strong enough to say, hey, I think that game power can translate. The problem is he has sustainably had a chase rate over 30%. And because that swing is so like long and lofty, really has struggled against fastballs. Yeah. And that's my big concern is like, you're going to really struggle if you're not hitting fastballs and you're chasing a lot. Yeah. And pitches in the top half of the zone gave him a ton of trouble. So high chase with a lot of trouble at the top half of the zone. I just think this is a hitter that pitchers can very easily game plan for. Mm-hmm. He hit 181 on pitches middle of the zone and above.
Wow.
Versus 325 with a 997 OPS on pitches middle of the zone and below. So like Mike Trout, we always talk about but he doesn't swing at anything at the top. Colby Thomas swings at everything. So that's my concern. But the flip side is you have an above average runner who's come along really nicely as a corner outfielder. Like, his reads and routes used to be shaky. He's come along really well. Looks like he can be a solid defender there. He clearly, when he hits it, like, will leave the yard. I think he can be that mistake hitter that provides decent defense in a corner and can run a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it seems like it'd be hard to be an everyday player with the offensive limitations.
I would think so. I would say the counting numbers were borderline unrivaled in minor league baseball this year. 44 doubles, 31 homers, 92 RBIs, and 15 bags as well. The 142 punch outs were pretty unrivaled as well. Like, there were not a lot of prospects that K'd 140, 150 times in the minor leagues this year. But he kind of starts a slew of 3 tooled out outfielders that have a clear cut deficiency here. I will say
Yes.
he's done nothing but hit since getting out of Mercer, and even at Mercer, albeit the SoCon, like, it was really good in college. What, a 1014 OPS in 111 games, and 111 games, 32 homers, 100 driven in. Like, this is kind of a continuation, and it's fun to see those guys that were very successful in college take that success into the lower levels of the minor leagues. And he got up to Vegas and he had a 903 OPS in 73 games. I just feel like when he does get to, big league spring this year, this March, it's going to be tough. And like, if he does, earn a spot on the big league roster, like when he does play, he might get exposed. Like, there is a huge difference between the PCL and Major League Baseball.
I think he could outslug the peripherals, but when every single audience member can craft I would say a pretty solid game plan for him. I think it's just really about execution that didn't happen at the upper levels. Like, it's going to be hard when that's exactly what the big leagues do all the time, right? Where he hit 210 against four seamers this past year. And I told you he hit 181 against pitches in the top half of the zone. And he also chased over 40% of breaking balls. So what do? You go fastball up and you get him to chase on spin away.
Yep.
Or spin out of the zone.
Yeah.
And if he shows that he can, hedge that and improve the plate discipline, then I could absolutely see a guy that runs into enough homers to be a regular. But I think it's going to be tough to do that. He's also a reverse splits guy, which is interesting. Number 8, Denzel Clarke, where I think it's easier to envision a big league role for him, even if the bat doesn't come along the way that we hope.
Yeah.
Clarke, 70 speed, potential 70 glove out there. Like, there's no doubting the athleticism and the defensive value in the outfield and in center field. The problem is mechanically, and that's the one thing I will say about the A's. They are definitely willing to overlook swing mechanics. I understand that that's something that you can change, but I'm waiting to see some of these hitters change that. Clarke, it just hits the ball so hard, man. And the plate discipline is good, so that helps. I don't think I could confidently go more than a 30 hit tool. And the big reason why is the way that he's set up. He honestly never is able to get into that backside much at all. And I think the way that he's set up to where it reminds me of, like, it almost looks like a snowboarder. Like when a snowboarder is going and they're really in those quads. It almost looks like they're about to like sit down. Yeah. Whereas I think a lot of guys that are more crouched, they're more into their glutes and their backside. We've talked about it on the show. When you're in your quads, it's a lot more difficult to control your weight. And not only is he in his quads, his front foot's up on his toe. So I think at that point, it makes it quite difficult to control his lower half. And this was kind of one of those easy case studies where I see a swing, I immediately just go straight to, let's see how he handles velocity. Because when you push forward the way that he does, the bat's going to drag behind you. We've talked about that. And when the bat drags behind you, good luck trying to catch up to velo. He hit 214 against 93 plus in 2024. So that's the big challenge. If he makes that adjustment and he's able to find a way to control that lower half and stay back, he could be a monster because his EVs are plus. His everything else is incredible. But at 24 years old now, I'm just wondering if those adjustments are ever going to come. I'm hoping he gets up to the big leagues and Lawrence Butler's there and he's like, hey, dude, I used to fly onto my front foot prematurely. And these are some things that I found. Because if Clarke finds that, he could be a monster and put together numbers that are similar to what we saw from Lawrence Butler in the second half. But that's kind of what we're waiting to see.
Yeah. I will say this is probably the closest thing that we've seen to a future big league product from Denzel Clarke in his professional career. And it's not like the numbers are bad, like 280 minor league games and 827 OPS. And that was actually a lower mark this year than his career. He had a 784 OPS, but he was also repeating AA.
Yeah.
I was still kind of encouraged by what he did in AA this year, even if the numbers were not as good as the 64 game sample in Midland from 2023. Because at the end of the day, like, he leaned into what makes him him. And the stolen base fully came back into his game. I mean, like, yeah, okay, he's not going to walk much. Yeah, okay, and I know, like, the walk numbers and the plate discipline are a little different here. Like, you would not expect 39 walks in 116 games to be a 55 plate discipline, but you feel like within the course of an at bat, he's making smart decisions.
Yeah, and he was getting attacked this year because remember now, Velo, he was struggling against Velo. Great, we're gonna just like attack you with fastballs. The chase rates are still relatively low, and you look at the way he controls an AB. He spits on spin really well. Like, he does recognize spin well, which is another thing that I like. And I'm glad you bring that up. Like, he hits breaking balls well. This is a guy that I think, as much as any of these players that we're going to talk about in this like tier, has a chance to really have it all come together and become like this monster. But it's just like, when you repeat AA at 24 years old and your numbers take a little bit of a step backwards, it's hard to really aggressively push and say that. But again, nothing would surprise me with him here. And I agree. Like, we did see more of what that big league outlook could look like. The glove looked as good as ever. He leaned into the speed. If he can shore up those mechanics to hit the ball in the air a little bit more and catch up to Velo, he could absolutely be an everyday center fielder. But I feel good about him at least being a fourth.
Yeah. I also thought the fall league was encouraging, albeit 19 games, but 93 plate appearances. This guy walked 13 times. Like, he stayed within himself, and that produced in 19 games a 382, 495, 566 slash. He was better than every pitcher out there. Prove it. And he proved it.
And that's huge because, again, like, there was a lot of Velo there. So that seemed to be something that he was, keyed in on. And it's crazy. Like, he catches balls deep. Like, he will still hit them out. If you look at all of his home runs on fastballs, they're like down the right field line. He just needs to get to it. He's so strong and quick. So if he can just shore up that path, could be a lot of fun there. But regardless, this is a big leaguer for them, an elite glove, and a guy that can at least like handle the short side of platoon and give them plenty of value with the way he can go get it out there in the outfield. So this leads us to number 7 here, Jack Perkins, who I know we are the high guys on, and I'm going to make my pitch. But before that, one more quick break. All right, Jack Perkins, right-hander, who I think people were not paying enough attention to what he did in the second half, and really what he did this year. This was a different Jack Perkins than we have seen in the past. He totally changed his arm slot. It is and he's a short arm guy. So that's already funky. And we've talked about how short arm guys seem to create difficult angles for a lot of hitters. Yeah. He's short arm still, but now more horizontal. And being short arm and more horizontal, I think, has set him up to a spot where all of his stuff ticked up majorly. He threw more that way in college. So he went back to what was more natural for him. Fastball ticked up, both from a velocity perspective, and he gained an inch of vert. And he threw more strikes with it. The slider ticked up because he had a more distinct shape. His breaking balls used to blend together. And now, from this more horizontal release, he's able to really get on the side of the slider, true sweep to it, like a gross pitch, but then also has a more distinct gyro breaking pitch as well. That I like. Just having the different shapes was huge, because there was times where it's like, what was that one? They were all kind of blending together. Now he has more distinct velocity separation, and also I think creates a more unique tunnel where from that release point, fastball takes off with run and ride. You have more horizontal separation with the slider going the other way. This cutter as well. The curveball was a more distinct and depthy shape as well. And I think really the only pitch that didn't come along was the changeup off of that. Doesn't need it when he has a pair of breaking balls, a cutter, and this fastball that absolutely dominated when he was able to change this release point and gain what he gained with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and like do this for the YouTube crowd, but I texted you, like, it's nowhere near as extreme, but there are shades of Jason Adam in this and the short arm. Adam is much more vertical, I think, because he doesn't really use his legs that much. Adam is a tall and fall guy as opposed to a let's drive with the back leg and go. Perkins, think about the way that he's spinning the ball, almost like a quarterback. Like, he's got it close to his ear and he whips around to the point where, like, yeah, he can spin it really well, and that results in a 65 grade slider. But the fastball is also coming from a place where he is like doing this natural throw where he starts it close to his ear and then he's coming around whipping. He's using his torso very effectively. And I think that is probably the more underrated thing in the pitching delivery. When you're growing up, all you hear is legs. It's all about your lower half. It's all about your lower half. I agree. But it's kind of nice when your arm can work in sync with your torso as well. And I think he found a more comfortable version of that this year.
No doubt. I think that's excellent analysis on like the mechanical side, because it's not a coincidence where at 24 years old, you gain a full tick while also throwing more strikes, while also spinning it better too. Like he basically got to a point where it's, oh wait, this is how my body actually wants to move. And in doing that, the run and ride at a higher velocity from a release point where it's even going to play up further. He also was able to get that more distinct, like I said, sweep. So he's getting like 20 inches of horizontal separation from his fastball that runs and rides and that slider, making those two clear-cut different pitches. Then he's able to get that gyro break on the cutter, because when you're more horizontal there, you kind of get on the side of it, it bullet spins and drops. So that was a pitch for him against lefties. And then the curveball now is just its own shape instead of, I think, from the more vertical release point, his slider was blending with that curveball because he couldn't get on the side of it and sweep it. So now he's got the true sweeper, and then he's got that curveball, which is more of that vertical depth taste changer. But the four-seam fastball nearly tripled in zone whiff rate wise. That's outrageous. Like, you don't do that by accident. And also, he did that while pitching the entire year at Double-A. Also, the slider doing what it did off of that. So opponents hit 215 against his four-seamer. They hit 150 against his slider as well. And then that gyro cutter at 92 is just a problem. The way that this dude finished the year as well, he was throwing harder and harder as the season progressed. And if you include his two postseason outings, his final 6 appearances, he threw to a 1.18 ERA, 38 innings, 51 strikeouts. He allowed just 1 home run in that Texas League. And that's a 36% K rate, an 8% walk rate, 19 hits in those 38 innings. Opponents hit a $147 against him. And in that final start where he threw 94 pitches, sure his adrenaline was going, Midland, playoff game at Arkansas, he averaged 97.4 miles per hour on his fastball. We saw the best Jack Perkins we've seen. This is a guy that I feel very confident will, at the very least, with that fastball and slider and cutter, be a solid setup type of guy. But I also think could, with the improved command, also be a back end of the rotation starter who has flashes of holy shit, but then also has those days where it's like, okay, he got knocked around a little bit.
I was going to say, like, don't limit it to back of the rotation. Like, I do think he's going to flash mid-rotation starter stuff. He'll probably be that 4, that high ceiling, low floor 4. That's really hard.
Wow, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Low floor 4. But I do think that he can be that guy where it's like, wow, he could be a 2 for a poor team in Major League Baseball. I think you see that, 1 out of every 5 starts. I think 1 out of every 5 starts as well. You're going to see are we sure this guy's a starting pitcher? And then the other 3, the middle 3 is like, I like him at the back end of my rotation.
I'm going to call a shot on this one. Like, I think this guy's going to be a dude for them next year. And I hope they give him a shot
Cool.
because this is legit stuff. You see all these dog food supply ads we're getting on the article.
So
I think it's got to be my German Shepherd's just staring at me like, you should buy that value box of $200 of bully sticks.
Yeah. So my thing is like, why would you get a pack of 10 for $20 when you could get a pack of 3,000 for $200?
You know what that was? Not telling you the brand. They didn't pay for it. They paid for it on the website.
But you've got your trip to Chicago waiting. Your girlfriend's looking over your shoulder too. Like, this
holy crap! I was just checking my United flight. That is scary stuff.
Crazy ad feeds. It's
don't
wild.
Need to get into that, to the ad stuff. That is scary stuff. Number 6, Henry Bolte. He is a muscle hamster, speedster, Tyler O'Neill starter kit, 2nd round pick in 2022. 2022, right? I hope I updated that one correctly.
Yeah.
But Bolte had a phenomenal year. The challenge is every underlying metric points towards some concern hit tool wise. Yeah, 2022, 56 overall.
Yeah.
But I mean, the plate discipline really helps. It makes me feel a lot better. If you're going to be a 30 hit guy, but you got 60 power potential and you can run a chase rate below 20%, it can work. So very stiff operation in the box. And I think to try to simplify things, he leans down with his stance. I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to feel downhill so he can get that bat down and kind of feel like, Pete Alonso, how Alonso, before he gets into the box every time, or even when he gets in there, he does that like chop down wood thing that he's doing. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of guys don't want to do that because it can be really counterproductive for you. But if you're a guy that tends to lose the barrel or whatever, it is a good kind of feel versus real thing to do. And I feel like Bolte does that with his setup. But the problem is when you are that extreme with it, like when he loads, he's feeling downhill, his body's going to say, well, I got to get this barrel out. And then he's turning the shoulders back over the other way. And he's fighting his own body to get that barrel back around. So that resulted in a lot of swing and miss. However, he's super strong.
Yeah.
He has I think overall still a pretty direct, like, I'm just going to try to get to this ball. And even though he's going to put it on the ground a fair amount, he hits it so hard and he's so fast. This is a guy that, separate from the Kuroda-Grauer conversation, will sustainably have high BABIPs, right? Like, he's a guy that if you are a plus to plus plus runner and your 90th percentile exit velocity is tops in the org, which it is, it's 108. If you put it on the ground 50% of the time, a lot are going to get through and you're going to beat a lot out. So that helps. However, a 55% contact rate does not help.
Right.
He did that, though, in his age 20 season while reaching AA. For a hitter of his archetype, that is very, very impressive.
I love the Tyler O'Neill shout. And I think that more guys should lean into the Tyler O'Neill thing, because Tyler O'Neill was given a very long leash in St. Louis. Like, he had runway to work with because it's so tantalizing. And I think what you found in Bolte this year, especially when the 69-game sample in Lansing, the K's were there, but like, this is tantalizing for the A's. Like, they could have a guy that could flirt with 30. I mean, he was 20 years old, and you mentioned he got to AA. He got to AA for 54 games as a 20-year-old. And this is not an IFA guy that's been in the system forever. Like, he played 11 games at the complex in 2022. Like, we're talking about a guy that has shown so many flashes in just essentially 2 seasons of minor league baseball. There's a ton to be excited about here. And like, deficiencies aside, man, he's doing this at this young of an age. You hope that he can iron some of the weaknesses out, and all of a sudden, like, he becomes just a little bit more well-rounded. I think Tyler O'Neill's a perfect comp.
Well, and by the way, he can play a great corner and, can plug in center if you need it. Yeah. And the reads are getting better, but I with his speed and everything, and I have a lot of confidence he'll get to where he needs to be defensively. There's a 30-30 threat if it all clicks, like you said. So it's one of those where you just got to be willing to wear it if it doesn't all work out, because what it could be is so exciting. And the fact that he has been able to do that, what he has done with aggressive assignments for a player of his archetype, I think has to give some confidence. And slight swing adjustment could be all the difference in the world.
I think you have 2 guys here in Bolte and Clarke that you should be comfortable riding the roller coaster with, because like, the highs are worth it. Yeah.
Just need one. Yep. Yeah. And even like the lower end outcome still could be worth a big league spot in a role, especially Clarke.
Yeah.
Number 5 is another arm that I absolutely love that they acquired at the deadline. This was the headliner in the Lucas Urseg deal. It's Mason Barnett. I'm a big fan of his, man. And I liked him in Kansas City, but then seeing what he did after KC was really impressive as well. Another guy that made an adjustment in the second half of this season and really going into the year, but specifically in the second half. He made it just before he went over to the A's. So I don't want to like circle this as like, he got traded and the A's unlocked something. And maybe they helped him there, but I saw this trend kind of change later on. 3rd round pick by the Royals, by the way, in 2022. He is 100% is a supinator, where he is going to naturally cut stuff. His fastball's got cut ride. Then he has a slider off of that, which honestly has a little bit of ride to it too. This is the perfect combination for a guy that should be wearing out the top of the zone. And he wasn't at all. And then he started wearing out the top of the zone, and the results really followed. He flashes a good enough changeup as a 3rd pitch where and a curveball is a taste breaker where the command's good enough. I think above average cut ride fastball, a plus slider, and a changeup that flashes a little bit better than average, curveball that's fine. I think this guy screams like number 4 starter, and I just feel like the the floor is so high with him.
They grabbed a guy in Barnett. Like, they grabbed a top 5 prospect in exchange for a guy that wasn't pitching full time in minor league baseball until 2022. Like, wow, man. The flip of Urseg should be studied for a long time because they grabbed him. And I mean, dude, like, he didn't get the opportunity to debut with Milwaukee. Oakland picked him up in 2023. And that was just the case. Like, this guy had 15 and a third innings in Nashville in 2023 at a 6.46 ERA. He walked 10. And Oakland took their lumps with him in 23. And in 24, he was one of the better setup guys in all of baseball. And he got over to Kansas City. I'm talking Urseg, 25 innings, like 31 Ks and 3 walks. They turned that into a top 5 prospect. They took a lottery ticket in 2023, and it gave them a guy that can be a 4-starter for them. They've tried the 4-starter thing for a long time. Like, with how many Mason Barnetts we've talked about, there's also been a bunch of James Kaprelians and Kyle Mullers and Ken Waldichucks and all that. But this, for some reason,
stuff more.
Yeah, it feels different. It feels better.
And I think it's a slightly different approach in terms of the stuff. Instead of like, oh, pitch to contact and whatever. Now, this is a guy that with cut ride and unique shape, it's below average release height. So the thing that I like the most about Barnett is he has some very unique characteristics. So like, I like the number 4 starter, and it could be a high-end 4 starter with the unique characteristics instead of the number 4 starter that pitches to contact and, you know, you're hoping can consistently execute. I think that's a lot harder sometimes to feel as confident about all the time. With Barnett, very flat vertical approach angle for his release height, which I also think really helps everything play up. So once he started really wearing out the top of the zone, Barnett became a much different pitcher at the same level, right? Like, that's the crazy part about the trade is you get traded, you're still pitching in the same league. You went from Northwest Arkansas to Midland. And I'm including the final 3 starts with Northwest Arkansas because that's when I saw the tangible change in how he was attacking hitters. I think even if you extrapolate it to the last 5 starts with Northwest Arkansas, 14 starts, including the 2 postseason appearances too, he pitched to a 1.93 ERA in that Texas league, struck out 31% of batters. That's 99 Ks in 79 and thirds innings, while opponents hit 197 against him, allowed just 5 home runs. So like, start wearing out the top of the zone, start seeing a lot of results. And I think you got to feel good about that. And Barnett's another guy that I think should grab a rotation spot sometime this coming season.
Yeah.
Number 4, Max Muncy, former first-round pick in 2022, 25th overall by the A's, and a guy that I think is kind of prospect fatigue
Dude,
casualty here.
He was prospect fatigue from the jump. He's been one of the more underappreciated minor leaguers in the game for a long time now.
I was surprised to see where the industry kind of stands on him, because I get it. He had some stretches where it was like, okay, like he might not hit enough and whatever, but he has been pushed very aggressively and he has handled it well. He was hurt for a lot of last year. And I think that made it harder to really realize how much better he looked. But in his 50 PCL games, I understand it's the PCL, but he looked a lot more well-rounded and put together a strong campaign when he was healthy. I think there's a lot to like here as a guy that I believe profiles best at second base, but can give you 20 to 25 home runs, can play a solid second base, is an above average runner, can plug in at third and short when needed. And I think this is a potential better option than Zach Geloff if he's given the opportunity. I've just been surprised again that people have been moved off of Muncy as quickly as they have because he's 22, and he will be 22 for almost the entirety of next season as well. The swing decisions are a big wrinkle in this thing, but they've gotten better and better. And I mean, it's going to come down to whether he can hit enough. And I think he continues to trend in the right direction. He's going to slug. He's going to hit 20 to 25. So if he does that by playing also an above average second base, stealing 10 to 15 bags, plugging in at short and third when you need it, this is a solid big leaguer.
I know that A's fans liked this guy, but Max Muncy at some point in the 2025 season is going to take that third middle infield job from Max Schumann, and you got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Max Schumann, credit to you, man. I love that. He did get 460 plate appearances in the big leagues this year, but at the end of the day, if those can go to Muncy instead, do that. because there's so much more to dream on with Max Muncy. And yeah, like I'll stick with it. I do think that he could turn into a better option than Geloff, but why not roster both?
Yeah,
right now?
no doubt. No doubt.
I mean, Jacob Wilson at short, Geloff at second, Muncy filling in for both of them because he can hold his own at shortstop, and that's where the majority of reps came at short.
The actions, like we're fine overall. It was more the throwing side of things, which sometimes it seemed like you struggled with the transfer to like get in a comfortable spot and get the ball out. But yeah, if you're plugging him in there, I think he's going to be fine. It's more over like 162. I think it'd be death by a million paper cuts.
Yeah,
but yeah, he could absolutely fill in there. And the last thing I want to mention too is like I've harped on a lot of negative swing mechanics wise. Muncy's a guy that has tinkered a lot, and I really like where he settled at the end of the year. And since he made that change, I think you really saw the results where I think he just wanted to be in a spot where he could be ready for velocity and react to everything else. And he did that. So he kind of starts a little bit more stacked into his backside and open on the ball of his front foot. And then he just hovers that front foot, getting himself back closed. And it seems to be the way that his body moves, that the way that he was able to control his weight the best. As a result, on time for velocity consistently. He had an OPS north of 1,100 against fastballs. And then he cut his chase rate against fastballs by 10%. That tells me he's seeing the ball earlier. He's in a better spot. And if you crush fastballs and are just semi-competitive again, like the MLB average against breaking balls is like 6, or OPS is like 6 something, like mid 600s. If you punish fastballs and you're competitive enough against breaking balls and you make decent swing decisions, you'll have a long career. So I think Muncy's heading in the right direction still at just 22 years old.
Love it.
We've talked a lot about Luis Morales in the top 100 and stuff like that. One of the newcomers, guy that has ridiculous stuff. He checks in at number 3. It's a very easy sell from a stuff perspective, right? Like they gave him a lot of money, $3 million in 2022. It seems to be the magic number here with the A's. He's a 6'3", 200-pound right-hander who has a plus heater that is electric. Like it sits 97. He's 22 years old, by the way, and just turned 22.
Yeah.
He has a plus slider and a changeup that is also plus. It's just the command. It's really just the command. The curveball is even a solid pitch that he mixes in as a taste breaker. It is number 2 starter stuff, but the command is not totally there. And that's what it's all going to boil down to. If the command is where it's at now, it's probably a teasing 4, meaning like his stuff, he's going to have starts where it's like, oh, he's here. He could be a frontline kind of guy. And then there's going to be days where he walks the world or just falls behind and the fastball gets cheated for and they hit him. So that's what it looks like, but he's 22. So if the command even gets close to league average, he's, I think, a high-end middle rotation option.
Just looking at his 2023 again, like it's kind of funny to see a guy go DSL complex low A, high A. Nobody goes from the DSL to high A.
That is nuts. I would love to know how many times that's happened.
Yeah, I have no clue. I would not think often whatsoever. Complex to high A is common, but like you're already stateside. DSL to high A is wild. But yeah, full year in Lansing this year. I think full year in Midland this coming year. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're in AAA for a couple of starts and you could be there early 2026. I know you've got 26. That could be All-Star break. That could be May 1st. I have no idea when that would be. And he's going to be a very young starting pitcher. I'm with you, but like the stuff is just so exciting as it stands right now. It's electric. It's flat out electric.
And they were very careful with his innings. I think that's a big thing to monitor here. Like they definitely slowed him down at the end of the year.
Not Marco Raya careful, but like a little bit still careful.
No, I think after he went 6 shutty against Dayton, they were like, all right, let's taper you off a little bit. But also I think part of it was just him being inefficient. Like he did still throw a lot of pitches and just at times just couldn't get through 4 or 5 innings because of just how inconsistent the secondary command is. And that's going to be the big thing to monitor. But if he can land those 2 secondaries, the changeup and the slider for a strike near a 60% clip, he's going to dominate. So I love the stuff, and we'll just hope that the command comes along.
Yeah.
Another guy we've talked a lot about, Nick Kurtz. Not too many different ways you can break down Nick Kurtz at this point. What we talked about was awesome to see the first baseman in the Arizona Fall League. When he missed some time at the end of the year, 4th overall pick, they saved money with him, and it looks like a great grab by the A's there as well, because he rakes. Like we know that he's going to hit for power. We know he's going to hit the ball hard in the air, but we also know that he is going to run one of the more consistently patient approaches that you're going to see. And that, the power and the patience helps a ton. He's a phenomenal first baseman, but also they're going to start trying him in the outfield a little bit. And so we'll see what that looks like. He's a sneaky good athlete. My only concern is the injuries. You take a player that's often hurt and you're moving him to the outfield. How does that do for him? Maybe it's better. Maybe first base actually was causing some other shit. Who knows? But I do think that could be something to monitor. However, if he's able to play even just a remotely passable corner outfield, and he's that first base corner outfield type with his bat, that really helps the profile too. Like you have a guy now that, you don't have to just have limited to first base. I'm interested to see how the defense, looks out there if they keep giving him opportunities. But the bread and butter here with Nick Kurtz is plus power and an elite ability to get on base and enough hit.
I will say we didn't get to see Kurtz in person, right? Because you left. I left before you, but I think you left before Kurtz even got out to Arizona.
Didn't get to see him. I was gone.
Seeing photos, seeing like high resolution images of Nick Kurtz out in Arizona, it seems like he's taken some weight off in a good way. Like he doesn't look as, I don't want to say like wide. He doesn't look as first baseman as I feel like he did in the spring at Wake Forest. And that's important because you got to be able to move around, the corner outfield if you are going to do that. There are a lot of guys that have thinned out over the course of their career that are really good first basemen and didn't lose power whatsoever. Matt Olson is a guy that is probably as thin as he's ever been. Freddie Freeman is a guy that, like, it's pretty well documented. He's as thin as he's ever been. Not saying Kurtz is Olson or Freeman, but I'm saying Matt Olson was a guy that was tried in the corner outfield several times and was like, yeah, this could work. Kurtz, I feel like, could follow that. And hey, another Oakland first baseman here.
And there are some shades of Matt Olson here. I think you guys 6'5", you got a masher. I'm curious how the chase rates would compare. I think Olson a little bit more aggressive, but there are some similarities there as well. And there were stretches where Olson was much more patient in the earlier years. So I think there's a lot to like here. And you got to, if you're the A's, probably see those similarities. They're probably going to push him pretty quickly. And I think this is a guy that's a huge part of their future as well. But when you got 50 hit, at least potentially 70 plate discipline, 60 game power, and then you're either playing a great first base or even also plugging into the outfield. Yeah, this is a really, really solid piece for the A's moving forward. Yeah. Speaking of which, they've got their shortstop of the future here who wraps things up at number 1, and that's Jacob Wilson, who we expect to graduate quite quickly. As he will be the opening day shortstop. 70 hit tool. That was clear. No one was ever doubting that. I think maybe they thought it could tick to a 60 when he's not playing at Grand Canyon. What we've seen is that's absolutely not the case. And then what we've also seen is that he can hit the ball hard enough. A lot of doubles. And I think that's what you're kind of hoping for here is spray the gaps enough, because clearly bat to ball wise, this guy is as good as anybody in professional baseball. And the approach is going to be something to monitor as well. That was a concern for me where he's a little too expansive, but yeah, that's usually going to happen when you're that elite bat to ball wise. But it seems like with the hit tool and also the glove looking how it has it short, where he looks like he could at least be an average defender, maybe slightly above. His dad was fantastic, so it makes sense. This is just a solid everyday shortstop that you got to feel great about, who got there as quick as possible.
Dude, the fact that their top 2 prospects could get there in a combined game total under 200 is insane to me. Jacob Wilson, I think it was 79 minor league games for him, and Kurtz played 20 something this year. Yeah. He may have 30 more in the minor leagues. We could be looking at 150 cumulative minor league games for their top 2 prospects before making their debuts. And usually that's not a recipe for success, but you've got guys that were immensely successful in college and didn't show any issues in the minor leagues. That's where we're at in baseball. I think Oakland the A's. God, I got to stop saying Oakland, although I feel bad. The A's probably see 2 guys that have no business being in minor league baseball here. They might have seen that at draft time in 2023 and 2024. and they're pushing it. They're putting their money where their mouth is.
A reminder, this does include like a couple rehab games at the complex, I believe, and of course it's the PCL. Before, like not including the big league call up, and then the end of the year where he came back, of course, injury kind of derailed the momentum that he had built. 52 games this year in the minor leagues. He slashed 433, 473, 668. Yeah. The big thing that I like to see from him is that ground ball rate was below 50%. I think that's a sweet spot number for him. Of course, when you're making contact as much as he does, your ground ball rate is going to be high. If you can keep that under 50%, keep the chase rate under 30%, I think he's going to have a ton of success as a guy that hits a ton of doubles. And in those 52 games, he hit 28 doubles. So that is where he's going to get the slug. I think he flashed enough where he's going to be able to mix in 5 to 10 homers. And if he does that with a ton of doubles, there's enough impact there. But this is one of the best bat to ball guys playing at every shortstop. I love that the A's have been able to address some of these needs through the draft so quickly too. So you can see this core really coming together, and a 22-year-old Jacob Wilson's a big part of it. Excited for a full season of him next year. He's got to be one of the Rookie of the Year favorites, I think, in the American League when we go into next year, just off of the floor alone, right?
I would think so. Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, does Caminero still have eligibility?
No, I think they finally burned that.
Really?
I think they finally burned that, yeah.
Those, I'm not going to call them the idiots because they're Tampa Bay, because they're the Rays, but like those idiots.
Yeah, they finally burned it.
That's crazy. Wow. I absolutely think he should be in that conversation.
Yeah. So I'm excited. That'll be another conversation. We'll be doing that as the season gets closer and talk about all that good stuff. Been crushing through Rule 5 names, just trying to mine for gems. And there's a lot of interesting arms. We will have that for you. Probably next week or end of this week?
Maybe Friday. I think probably a Black Friday episode. I think our plan right now is record that Wednesday morning and not blow your Thanksgiving on the call up podcast, but probably give it to you on Black Friday.
I might just put it out and say, like, how sick are you? You know,
happy Thanksgiving. Yeah. Let's see if let's see if you guys are weirdos like us. I will say Cooper Bowman was a guy that was left unprotected. Like I don't know. Think about it. Maybe
could be interesting. Could be interesting. So that's another name to maybe throw into the bat side. It's light bats wise, a lot of arms. We'll be talking about that, but that'll do it for this A system. More systems on the way. As always, thank you for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.